December 24th, 1884. Frost Ridge, Wyoming Territory. The blizzard screamed like a dying animal. Samuel Frost rode through it alone, his coat lined with mink, his saddlebag heavy with gold. He was the richest man in 3 counties. He was also the loneliest. He saw the hand first, small, pale, reaching out from the snowdrift like a question, and no one wanted to answer. He stopped his horse, stared. It was a child. White hair matted with ice, skin the color of milk, eyes closed. The wind howled. His breath came out in clouds. For 7 years, Samuel Frost had prayed for nothing. Now he whispered, "Not again." The girl didn't move. Snow was already burying her fingers. He could ride on. Pretend he'd seen nothing. Let the storm finish what the town had started. He dismounted. His hands shook. Samuel knelt. The snow bit through his gloves. He dug with both hands, fast and clumsy, like a man trying to undo something he'd already lost. The child was buried to her chest. Her lips were blue. Her eyelids didn't flutter. He pulled her free. She weighed nothing, like holding air. Samuel wrapped her in his coat, the fur lining swallowing her small frame. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat, waited. There. Faint, but there. He hadn't held a child in 7 years. The last time, his daughter had died in his arms. He lifted Pearl onto his horse and climbed up behind her. She slumped against him, her head lolling. He could feel her frozen breath against his chest. Shallow, desperate. "Stay alive," he muttered. "Just stay alive." The horse lunged forward. Snow whipped his face. The world was white and howling and endless. He didn't know her name. Didn't know where she'd come from. Didn't know why someone had left her to die. But he rode, fast, like God was chasing him. Ironwood Ranch rose from the valley like a fortress. 3 stories of dark wood and stone. Smoke curled from 2 chimneys. Lamplight glowed in a few windows, cold and distant. Samuel had built it to show the world he'd won. Now it felt like a tomb. He kicked the door open and carried the girl inside. His ranch hand, Jesse, looked up from the fire, startled. "Boss, who?" "Blankets," Samuel barked. "Hot water, now." Jesse didn't ask again. He ran. Samuel laid the girl on the floor in front of the fireplace. Her white hair spread across the wood like spilled milk. Her skin was so pale he could see the veins beneath it, blue and fragile. He pulled off her frozen socks. Her toes were white. He rubbed them between his palms, trying to force warmth back into her. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." Jesse returned with blankets and a kettle. Samuel wrapped the girl tight, then poured warm water over a cloth and pressed it to her hands, her feet, her face. "Boss," Jesse said quietly. "Where'd she come from?" "I don't know." "What's her name?" "I don't know." Jesse stared at the girl. She's albino." Samuel said nothing. "The Carters had a girl like this," Jesse continued. "Orphan. Parents died in a wagon accident last spring. They took her in, but folks said she was bad luck, white like a ghost, pink eyes. They were scared of her." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Scared enough to leave her in a blizzard?" Jesse looked away. "People do terrible things when they're afraid?" The girl coughed. Once, weak. Samuel leaned closer. "That's it. Breathe." Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. Pink eyes, pale as dawn. They stared at Samuel, unfocused, confused. She blinked. Her lips moved. "Papa." The word was barely a whisper, but it hit Samuel like a fist to the chest. He froze. Couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Jesse shifted behind him. "Boss." Samuel stood abruptly, turned away, walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him in the dark glass. Old, haunted. "She doesn't know what she's saying," Samuel said, his voice flat. "She's delirious." "Boss," Jesse said gently. "When's the last time anyone called you that?" Silence. Outside, the storm buried the world. Inside, a girl who should be dead had called him Papa. Samuel Frost had no idea which was more terrifying. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in a chair across from the fireplace, watching the girl breathe. Every few minutes, he'd check her pulse. Still there. Faint, but steady. Jesse had gone to bed hours ago. The house was silent, except for the crackle of the fire and the wind battering the walls. Samuel stared at the girl's white hair. It reminded him of Clara's. Not in color, but in the way it fell across the pillow. Soft, innocent. Clara had been 8 when she died. This girl looked about 7. He'd been 200 miles away when Clara got sick. Closing a cattle deal. Building his empire. His wife had sent a telegram. "Come home. Clara burning." He'd read it in a saloon. Thought, "The doctor is there. She'll be fine. This deal closes tomorrow." He didn't leave. Clara died at dawn. He arrived at sunset. His wife's last words to him. "You killed her by not being there. Don't touch me again." She left. He never saw her again. Samuel closed his eyes, opened them. The girl was still breathing. He stood. walked to the stairs, stopped. On the second floor was a locked room, Clara's room. He hadn't opened it in 7 years, hadn't even looked at the door. But tonight, he climbed the stairs, stood in front of the door, stared at the padlock. He didn't open it. He just stood there, silent, until the fire downstairs died to embers. Then he went back down, sat in the chair, watched the girl breathe. And for the first time in 7 years, Samuel Frost didn't count his gold before sleeping. He counted her breaths instead. Morning came quiet. The blizzard had passed. Pale light crept through the windows. The world outside was white and still, like God had erased everything and forgotten to redraw it. Pearl woke in a room she didn't recognize. She lay in a real bed, soft blankets, clean sheets. The air smelled like wood smoke and something else. Soap, maybe. Or bread. She sat up slowly. Her body ached. Her fingers tingled. But she was warm. The room was small, a dresser, a chair, a window with frost flowers on the glass. On the chair sat a folded dress, wool socks, and a pair of shoes too big for her. She stared at them. No one had given her new clothes since her parents died. She touched the dress. The fabric was rough, but clean. Someone had tried to cut it down to her size. The stitching was uneven, like a man had done it. She dressed slowly. The socks went up to her knees like boots. She almost smiled. Then she saw the mirror. She stopped, stared at her reflection. White hair, pink eyes, pale skin like milk. The Carters had called her Ghost Girl. The town children threw rocks. The preacher said she was marked by sin. She looked away. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Pearl walked barefoot across cold wood floors, following the smell of food. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She found a dining room, a long table, too many chairs. At the far end sat the man who'd saved her. He didn't look up. He was cutting a piece of bacon with slow, mechanical precision. His face was hard, weathered, like someone had carved it from stone and forgotten to add warmth. Pearl stood in the doorway, didn't move. A younger man appeared from the kitchen carrying a plate. He saw her and smiled. "Well, good morning, little one," Jesse said. "You're awake." Samuel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked up. Their eyes met. Pearl's first instinct was to apologize. For being alive, for being here, for being wrong. But the man just nodded once, then went back to eating. "Come on," Jesse said gently. "Let's get you fed." He led her to a chair halfway down the table, set a plate in front of her. Bacon, eggs, bread with butter. Pearl stared at it. More food than she'd seen in weeks. "Go ahead," Jesse said. She picked up the bacon with her fingers, bit into it. Grease ran down her chin. Jesse chuckled softly. "You can use the fork if you want." Pearl looked at the fork, then at Jesse. She didn't understand. Jesse sat beside her, picked up his own fork. "Like this," she watched. Tried to copy him. The fork slipped. The eggs fell. "That's all right," Jesse said. "Takes practice." Samuel said nothing, just ate, stared at his plate like it held all the answers in the world. Pearl ate slowly. Each bite felt like a gift she didn't deserve. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you, sir." Samuel's jaw tightened. He set down his fork. "Don't call me sir." Pearl flinched. "I'm not your—" He stopped, looked away. "Just don't." Silence filled the room like snow. Jesse cleared his throat. "Boss, she's just being polite." "I know." She didn't mean, "I know." Samuel stood, pushed his chair back. The legs scraped loud against the floor. He looked at Pearl. Really looked at her. Pink eyes, white hair, small and breakable. "You'll stay until the storm clears," he said, his voice flat. "Then we'll figure out where you belong." Pearl's voice was barely audible. "I don't belong anywhere." Samuel stopped, turned back, stared at her. Something flickered in his face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. He said nothing, just walked out. The door closed behind him. Pearl looked at Jesse. "Did I make him angry?" Jesse sighed, sat down beside her. "No, little one. You just reminded him of someone." "Who?" Jesse hesitated. "Someone he lost." Pearl spent the morning exploring. Jesse let her wander, as long as she stayed inside. The house was big. Too big for one man, rooms that no one used, furniture covered in sheets, pictures on the walls but faces turned away, or missing. She found the library, shelves full of books. She pulled one down, opened it, stared at the words. She could read a little. Her mother had taught her. But these words were too big, too strange. She found a smaller book, a storybook, pictures of animals and children. She sat on the floor, opened it, traced the illustrations with her finger. Footsteps. She looked up. Samuel stood in the doorway. She froze. Thought she'd done something wrong. "That was my daughter's," Samuel said quietly. Pearl looked at the book, then at him. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "It's fine." Silence. Samuel stepped inside. stared at the bookshelf like it was an old enemy. "Can you read?" he asked. "A little," he nodded, said nothing else, just stood there. Pearl gathered her courage. Can you read to me?" Samuel's face hardened. "No." "Why?" "Because I said no." He turned and left. Pearl sat alone on the floor. She didn't cry. She was used to this. People always left. She closed the book carefully, put it back on the shelf, whispered to the empty room, "I'm sorry." That afternoon, Pearl wandered upstairs. She didn't mean to. She was just following the light. A window at the end of the hall glowed gold with winter sun. She stopped at a door. It had a padlock. She touched it. Cold metal. "Don't touch that." Pearl spun around. Samuel stood at the top of the stairs, his face dark. "I'm sorry. I didn't—" "That room." He stepped closer. His voice was low, controlled. "It's not for you." Pearl looked at him, saw pain, not anger. "Did someone die?" she asked softly. Samuel froze. Didn't answer. The silence stretched long and terrible. Finally, Pearl whispered, "I'm sorry." Samuel's hands clenched, unclenched. "Her name was Clara," he said, his voice barely audible. "She was 8. She died 7 years ago." Pearl looked at the locked door, then back at him. "You miss her?" It wasn't a question. Samuel's throat worked. He turned away. "Every day." He walked back downstairs, left Pearl standing alone in the hallway. She stared at the locked door, placed her small hand flat against the wood, whispered, "I won't forget you, Clara." Then she went back downstairs. That night, Jesse made stew. The 3 of them sat at the long table, Samuel at one end, Pearl at the other, Jesse in the middle, trying to fill the silence with small talk. "Storm's clearing," Jesse said. "Should be able to ride into town by tomorrow." Samuel nodded. "Folks will be asking about the girl." Samuel said nothing. Jesse looked at Pearl. She was eating slowly, savoring every bite like it might be her last. "What's your name, little one?" Jesse asked gently. Pearl looked up. "Pearl." "That's a pretty name." She didn't respond, didn't smile. Jesse tried again. "Where are your folks, Pearl?" "Dead." The word hung in the air. Samuel's fork stopped. "Wagon accident," Pearl continued softly. 6 months ago, the Carters took me in, but they said I was cursed. Because of—" She gestured at her white hair, her pale skin. Jesse's face darkened. "That's nonsense." Pearl shrugged. "Everyone said it." "Well, everyone's a fool." Pearl looked at Samuel. He was staring at his plate, not eating, not moving. She wanted to say something, wanted to thank him, wanted to ask if she could stay, but she'd learned long ago that asking for love was dangerous. So she said nothing, just finished her stew, and tried not to hope. The days blurred together. Pearl learned the rhythm of the ranch, wake before dawn, help Jesse with breakfast, stay out of Samuel's way, go to bed when the stars came out. She didn't ask to stay, didn't ask when she'd have to leave. She just existed, quiet, careful, like a ghost trying not to haunt anyone. On the 3rd morning, Jesse taught her to wash dishes. "Soap first," he said, demonstrating, "then rinse, then dry." Pearl copied him. The water was warm, bubbles formed, one floated up between them. She reached for it. It popped against her finger. She almost smiled. "There you go," Jesse said softly. "Knew you had it in you." Samuel stood in the doorway, watching. He said nothing, just watched Pearl's small hands scrubbing a plate twice her size. When she looked up, he was gone. The next day, Jesse took her to the stables. The horses were huge. Pearl had never been this close to one before. They smelled like earth and hay and something wild. "Don't be scared," Jesse said. "They're gentle." Pearl reached out slowly. Her fingers brushed the horse's nose. Soft, warm. The horse huffed. Pearl jumped back. Jesse laughed. "He's just saying hello." Samuel appeared from the back stall. He was carrying a saddle, his sleeves rolled up. He looked at Pearl, then at the horse. "You want to feed him?" Samuel asked. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Pearl nodded. Samuel grabbed a handful of oats from a bucket, held out his hand flat. The horse ate from his palm, lips soft and careful. "Like that," Samuel said, flat hand, "or he'll bite by accident." He poured oats into Pearl's palm. She held it out, trembling. The horse leaned in, ate. Pearl's eyes went wide. "He's eating from me." You're good at this," Samuel said. It was the first compliment he'd given her. Pearl looked up at him, really looked. His face was hard, but his eyes, just for a moment, were soft. "You're good at this too," she said quietly. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Used to be." He turned and walked away. That afternoon, Pearl found the library again. She pulled the storybook from the shelf, sat on the floor, opened it. The pictures were beautiful. A girl and her father, a garden, a dog, She traced the words with her finger, trying to sound them out. B-E-A-U. She stopped. Too hard. Footsteps. Samuel stood in the doorway again, like he was haunting his own house. Pearl closed the book quickly. I'm sorry. You can keep it, Samuel said. She looked up, surprised. If you want. Pearl held the book to her chest. Really? Samuel nodded. Didn't come closer. Just stood there. Can you... Pearl's voice was small. Can you read to me? Just one page? Samuel's face closed like a door slamming shut. No. Why not? Because I said no. He left. Pearl sat alone with the book. She opened it again, stared at the words she couldn't read, whispered to herself, It's okay, I can learn. But her throat was tight. In town, the rumors had already started. Eliza Thorne stood behind the counter of her general store, wrapping a pound of coffee for Mrs. Hatcher. Did you hear? Mrs. Hatcher said, her voice low and eager. Samuel Frost took in that albino child. Eliza's hands paused. Pearl? That's the one. The Carters left her to freeze. Good riddance, I say. Girls cursed. Eliza's jaw clenched. She's a child, Margaret, not a curse. Mrs. Hatcher sniffed. White as a ghost, pink eyes like a demon. My husband says she'll bring bad luck to the whole valley. Your husband's a fool, Mrs. Hatcher gasped. Eliza Thorne? She's 7 years old, Eliza said, her voice hard. She lost her parents. She almost died. And you're calling her cursed? Well, Mrs. Hatcher gathered her coffee. We'll see what happens to Samuel Frost. Mark my words, that girl's trouble. She left. Eliza stood alone in her shop. She stared out the window at the snow-covered street. She'd lost her own son 3 years ago. Winter fever. He'd been 9. She knew what grief looked like. And she'd seen it in Samuel's face for 7 years. Taking in Pearl, was it mercy? Or was it something else? Something desperate. Eliza grabbed her shawl, started packing a basket, blankets, medicine, dried fruit, bread. She'd visit Ironwood Ranch tomorrow. Not to judge, to make sure the girl was safe. In his office at the edge of town, Magistrate Oswin Caldwell reviewed the week's reports. A knock at the door. Enter. His deputy stepped inside, young, nervous. Sir, there's been talk. Oswin didn't look up from his papers. There's always talk. About Samuel Frost, sir. Now Oswin looked up. Apparently he's taken in a child. An orphan, albino girl, no papers filed. No legal guardianship claim. Oswin leaned back in his chair. Unclaimed? Yes, sir. The Carters had her, but they left her outside during the blizzard. And Frost found her. Seems so. Oswin folded his hands. His face showed nothing. No anger, no sympathy, just calculation. The territory has protocols, Oswin said calmly. Orphans must be registered with the court, processed through the proper channels. If Frost hasn't filed paperwork, he's in violation. The deputy shifted. Sir, the girl would have died. I'm aware. Oswin's voice was cold, precise. But the law doesn't make exceptions for sentiment, deputy. It can't. The moment we allow one man to break protocol, no matter how noble the reason, we invite chaos. So what do we do? Oswin stood, walked to the window, looked out at the frozen town. We wait 3 days, he said. Give Frost time to file the paperwork. If he doesn't, I'll visit him personally. And if he refuses to surrender her? Oswin turned. His eyes were hard. Then he'll learn that the law is not a suggestion. That night, Pearl couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent, except for the wind outside and the creak of old wood. She thought about the locked door upstairs, about Clara, about Samuel's face when he said her name. Pearl got up, barefoot and quiet, crept into the hallway. She stood at the base of the stairs, looked up. She could go back to bed. Forget it. Stay out of the way. Or she climbed, slow, careful. Every step felt like breaking a rule. She reached the second floor. The locked door waited. She stood in front of it, placed her hand flat against the wood. I don't know you, she whispered. But he loved you. I can tell. She paused. I won't try to be you. I promise. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Pearl spun around. Samuel stood at the top of the stairs, his face unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. I'm sorry, Pearl whispered. I didn't mean... Go to bed. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. Pearl nodded, started to walk past him. She stopped. Mr. Frost? He didn't look at her. What? Thank you for saving me. Samuel's throat worked. He said nothing. Pearl went back to her room. Samuel stood alone in the hallway, staring at Clara's door. He reached for the padlock. His fingers touched the cold metal, then pulled away. Not yet. He went back downstairs, poured himself whiskey, sat in the dark. Outside, the first stars came out. Winter stars, cold and distant. Inside, a man who'd built an empire out of stone realized he'd forgotten how to live in it, and a girl with white hair lay awake in a stranger's house, afraid to hope she might finally have somewhere to stay. The quiet wouldn't last, it never did. Eliza arrived just after noon. She rode up alone, a basket strapped to her saddle. Samuel saw her from the window and cursed under his breath. He met her at the door before she could knock. Eliza. Samuel. She dismounted, grabbed the basket. I came to see the girl. She's fine. Let me see her. Samuel blocked the doorway. You don't trust me? Eliza looked him in the eye. I trust you. I don't trust your ghosts. The words hung between them like smoke. Samuel stepped aside. Eliza found Pearl in the kitchen with Jesse. The girl was drying dishes, her sleeves rolled up, her white hair tied back with string. She looked up when Eliza entered. Her pink eyes went wide. Hello, Pearl, Eliza said gently. Pearl said nothing, just stared. My name's Eliza. I run the general store in town. She set the basket on the table. I brought you some things. Pearl didn't move. Eliza reached into the basket, pulled out a hairbrush, carved wood, simple but clean. May I brush your hair? Eliza asked. Pearl looked at Jesse. He nodded encouragingly. She nodded. Eliza pulled up a chair. Pearl sat in front of her, small and still. Eliza began to brush, gentle, patient, working through the tangles. Pearl's shoulders began to shake. It's all right, Eliza whispered. I'm not going to hurt you. I know, Pearl said, her voice breaking. It's just, no one's done this since my mama died. Eliza's hands paused, then continued, even gentler. She began to braid Pearl's white hair, 3 strands woven together. When she finished, she tied it with a ribbon from the basket. There, Eliza said softly. Beautiful. Pearl touched the braid. Really? Really? Pearl turned around. Her eyes were wet. Thank you, Miss Eliza. Eliza cupped the girl's face. You're beautiful, child. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Samuel stood in the doorway, watching, his face cracked. Just for a moment. Then he turned and walked away. Eliza found him in his office an hour later. He was standing at the window, staring at the frozen valley. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on his desk. Why did you take her in? Eliza asked. Samuel didn't turn around. What kind of question is that? An honest one. Silence. She would have died, Samuel said finally. So would 100 others. Eliza stepped closer. You've ridden past plenty of suffering before, Samuel. Why her? He said nothing. This isn't about her, is it? More silence. It's about Clara. Samuel's hands clenched on the windowsill. Don't. Eliza's voice was firm but not unkind. You think if you save this girl, it'll erase what happened to your daughter? Samuel turned, his face hard with anger. You don't know what you're talking about. I lost my son too, Samuel. Eliza's voice didn't waver. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Wait, Samuel turned back to the window. His jaw worked. I wasn't there, he said quietly. When Clara needed me, I wasn't there. I know. I was closing a deal. Building this, he gestured at the walls. All of this, and she died alone. She wasn't alone. Your wife was with her. And where was I? Samuel's voice broke. 200 miles away, counting money. Eliza said nothing. Samuel's shoulders sagged. So you think saving Pearl will fix that? I don't know. Samuel's voice was raw. But if I don't try... He stopped. Then what? Eliza pressed gently. Samuel turned to face her. His eyes were red. Then Clara died for nothing. The truth hung in the air like broken glass. Eliza stepped closer. Samuel, you can't save the dead by saving the living. Then what am I supposed to do? His voice was barely a whisper. Eliza's own eyes were wet now. Love her because she's here, not because Clara isn't. Samuel looked away. His hands were shaking. Every time I look at her, he said, I see my daughter. I see the chance I didn't take. The moment I chose wrong. That's not Pearl's fault. I know. He wiped his face roughly. But I can't separate it. I can't look at her and not see what I failed to do. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then maybe, she said gently, you need to forgive yourself first. I don't deserve forgiveness. None of us do. Eliza touched his arm. But we need it anyway. Samuel said nothing. Eliza picked up her shawl. That girl deserves a father, Samuel, not a penance. If you can't give her that, you need to let her go. She left. Samuel stood alone in his office. He looked at the shelf where Clara's oil lamp sat. Dark, cold, untouched for 7 years. He'd told himself he was saving Pearl out of mercy, but the truth was uglier than that. He'd saved her because He was desperate. Desperate to prove he wasn't the man who let his daughter die. Desperate to rewrite a story that had already ended. And that wasn't fair to Pearl. She deserved better than to be someone's second chance. Samuel sat down at his desk, put his head in his hands. Outside, the sun began to set. Inside, a man made of gold realized the weight of it was crushing him. That night, Pearl heard voices. She crept to the top of the stairs, listened. Samuel was talking to Jesse in the main hall. "Can't keep her," Samuel was saying. Pearl's heart stopped. "Boss, she's got nowhere to go. That's not my problem." You made it your problem when you brought her here." "I made a mistake." Silence. Pearl's hands gripped the railing. "She thinks you're her father now," Jesse said quietly. "I'm not." Then what are you?" Samuel didn't answer. Pearl backed away from the stairs, went to her room, closed the door. She sat on the bed, stared at the wall. She'd known this would happen. Everyone left. Everyone always left. She pulled the storybook from under her pillow, the one Samuel had said she could keep, opened it, traced the picture of the father and daughter. A tear hit the page. She closed the book carefully, put it back under the pillow, then lay down, and waited for morning, when he'd tell her to leave. Samuel woke to the sound of hooves. 3 riders, coming up the valley road. He knew who it was before they crested the hill. Oswin Caldwell sat tall in his saddle, dressed in black like a preacher. His deputy rode beside him. A third man, armed, brought up the rear. Samuel met them outside. Jesse stood behind him on the porch. Oswin dismounted, pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Mr. Frost," he said formally, "I'm here on official business. State your business and leave." Oswin unfolded the paper. "You're harboring an unregistered minor. That's a violation of territorial law. I saved her life." "Oh, commendable." Oswin's voice was flat, professional. "But the law requires orphans to be processed through proper channels, registered with the court, placed in appropriate care." Samuel stepped forward. "She's not going to an orphanage. That's not your decision." "The hell it isn't." Oswin didn't blink. "You have no legal standing, Mr. Frost. No blood relation, no filed guardianship claim. The child is property of the territory until the court decides otherwise. She's not property. Under the law, she is." Samuel's hands clenched into fists. "She'll die in one of those places." Perhaps." Oswin folded the paper carefully. "But the law doesn't make exceptions for sentiment. It can't. The moment we allow one man to break protocol, no matter how noble the reason, we invite chaos." Noble?" Samuel's voice rose. "I pulled her out of the snow. Your law left her there to freeze." The Carters made their decision," Oswin said coldly. "I'm not here to judge them. I'm here to enforce order." Behind them, the door opened. Pearl stepped onto the porch. She wore the too-big dress. Her white hair was still braided from Eliza's visit. Her pink eyes were wide with fear. She looked at the men, the horses, the rifle on the deputy's saddle. She knew. Oswin saw her. His expression didn't change. "Albino," he observed. "That explains the abandonment." Samuel moved between them. "Get off my land." Oswin's voice remained calm, clinical. "I'll return in 3 days with a court order. If you don't surrender the child, you'll be arrested for obstruction. Try it." Oswin mounted his horse, looked down at Samuel. "The law is not a suggestion, Mr. Frost, and you are not above it." And he turned his horse. The 3 riders left. Samuel stood in the yard until they disappeared over the hill. Then he turned to Pearl. She was shaking. "Are they taking me away?" Her voice was small, broken. Samuel knelt, eye level with her. "No." "You promise?" He hesitated, saw her hope, her fear, then lied. "I promise." That night, Pearl's fever started. Jesse found her shivering in her bed, her skin burning. The cold she'd caught in the snow had finally taken hold. "Boss!" Jesse shouted down the stairs. "Boss, she's sick." Samuel took the stairs 3 at a time. Pearl was delirious, crying, calling for her mother. "Mama? Where's Mama?" Samuel pressed a hand to her forehead, scalding. "Get blankets," he ordered. "And water, cold water." He carried Pearl to the main room, laid her on the sofa near the fire. Her whole body shook. Jesse brought water. Samuel soaked a cloth, pressed it to her forehead. "Mama," Pearl whimpered. "I'm cold." "I know," Samuel whispered. "I know." He piled blankets on her, but she kept shaking. Hours passed. The fever climbed. Pearl's eyes opened, unfocused, glazed. "Mama," she whispered. "Is that you?" Samuel's throat closed. "No, child, it's me." "Are you—" Her small hand reached for his. "Are you my papa now?" Samuel couldn't answer. Pearl's eyes filled with tears. Even in delirium, she knew the truth. "Everyone leaves me," she whispered. "You'll leave too." "I won't," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "I swear." "Mama said that." Pearl's breath hitched. Then she died. Samuel held her hand. It was so small in his, like holding air. Papa? Pearl's voice was fading. Why doesn't anyone want me? I want you, Samuel choked out. I want you. But she'd already closed her eyes. Jessie stood in the doorway. Boss, she needs a doctor. The nearest doctor is 2 days' ride. Then we pray. Samuel looked at Pearl's pale face. Her white hair spread across the pillow like frost. He stood abruptly, climbed the stairs, stood outside Clara's door, stared at the padlock. His hands shook as he pulled the key from his pocket. The lock opened with a click. The door swung inward. 7 years of dust, 7 years of silence. Clara's room, exactly as she'd left it. The small bed, the toys, the books, and on the table beside the bed, the oil lamp, brass and glass, Clara's nightlight. He hadn't lit it since she died. Samuel picked it up, the weight of it familiar and terrible. He carried it downstairs, set it on the table beside Pearl, struck a match. His hand trembled. The flame caught, the lamp glowed, golden light filled the room. For the first time in 7 years, Samuel Frost prayed. Please, he whispered. Don't take her. I know I don't deserve mercy, but she does. Please. He sat beside Pearl, held her hand. You can take everything else, he said to God, or the dark, or whoever was listening. My land, my money, my life. But don't take her. Not her. Pearl stirred. Her eyes opened slightly. The lamp, she whispered. It's pretty. It was Clara's. She'd like me, Pearl said, her voice dreamy. I think she'd like me. Samuel's vision blurred. She would. Pearl smiled faintly. Then her eyes closed again. Samuel sat through the night. Jessie brought coffee. Samuel didn't drink it. The lamp burned steady. Outside, the wind howled like wolves. Inside, a man who hadn't cried in 7 years finally wept. Dawn came cold and gray. Samuel heard footsteps on the porch. The door opened. Running Bear stepped inside without knocking. The old Shoshone elder looked at Pearl on the sofa, at the lamp, at Samuel's face. You lit the lamp, Running Bear said quietly. She's dying. No, she's fighting. Running Bear walked to the sofa, placed a hand on Pearl's forehead, closed his eyes. After a long moment, he opened them. The fever will break, he said, but only if she wants to stay. What does that mean? Running Bear looked at Samuel. She believes no one wants her. That belief is stronger than any medicine. I want her? Have you told her? Samuel said nothing. Running Bear straightened, walked to the window, looked out at the frozen valley. The white buffalo is rare, he said. That is why it is holy. The girl is the same, born different, rejected by her people, but sacred. The magistrate is coming to take her. Then you must choose. Running Bear turns to face him. Will you obey the law that kills, or the law that lives? What does that mean? The law of men says she is property, unclaimed, worthless. Running Bear's voice was firm. But the law of creation says she is sacred, chosen, beloved. Samuel looked at Pearl, so small, so fragile. I can't fight the law, he said. You fought a blizzard. You can fight a man in a suit. If I break the law, I lose everything. Running Bear nodded. Yes, everything except her. He walked to the door, stopped. You fear losing her the way you lost Clara, Running Bear said. But the only way to truly lose her is to let them take her. He left. Samuel sat alone with Pearl and the burning lamp. The fever still raged. She was still fighting. But Samuel realized something. The law could be wrong, and if he obeyed it, Pearl would die. But if he broke it, he'd lose his land, his wealth, his legacy, everything he'd built. He looked at the ranch around him, the empire he'd constructed out of guilt and gold, then looked at Pearl's sleeping face. What was worth more, the life he'd built or the life he could save? Outside, 3 days until Oswin returned. 3 days to decide. Samuel reached out, touched Pearl's white hair. I won't let them take you, he whispered. Pearl didn't hear him, but the lamp burned on, steady, like a promise finally spoken. The fever broke just before dawn. Samuel woke in the chair beside the sofa. His neck ached. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. Pearl was breathing, steady, calm. He reached out, touched her forehead, cool. He sat back, exhaled. His whole body shook with relief. The lamp still burned on the table, the flames steady and soft. Pearl's eyes opened, slowly. She looked at him. Papa? Her voice was a whisper, hoarse. I'm here. You stayed. Samuel's throat tightened. I said I would. Pearl's eyes were clearer now, present. No one ever does. He took her hand. I'm not no one. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Samuel brushed it away with his thumb. Rest, he said quietly. You're safe. Pearl's eyes closed again, but this time she was smiling. Jesse came downstairs an hour later, found Samuel still sitting beside Pearl. Boss, Jesse said gently, you need to sleep. I'm fine. You've been up for 2 days. Samuel didn't respond, just watched Pearl breathe. Jesse poured coffee, brought it to him. Samuel took it but didn't drink. She's going to be all right, Jesse said. For now. What are you going to do when Oswin comes back? Samuel stared at the lamp. The flame reflected in his tired eyes. I don't know. Jesse sat in the other chair. You could file the paperwork, make it legal. He won't approve it. I have no blood claim, no wife. The court will side with the orphanage. Then what? Samuel set down the coffee, leaned forward, his hands clasped together like he was praying again. I could run, he said quietly. Take her west. Start over. You'd lose everything here. I know. The ranch, the land. Everything you built? I know. Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Is she worth it? Samuel looked at Pearl, her white hair spread across the pillow, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. Yes, he said. No hesitation. Jesse nodded slowly. Then I'll help. Samuel looked at him. You could lose your job. Jobs are easy to find. Good men aren't. Jesse stood. You saved her once. We'll help you save her again. He left Samuel alone with Pearl and the burning lamp. That afternoon, Pearl woke fully. Samuel brought her broth. She ate slowly, her hands weak. How do you feel? He asked. Tired. You were very sick. Pearl nodded, looked at the lamp on the table. You lit Clara's lamp. Yes. For me? Samuel hesitated. Then, yes. Pearl set down the spoon. Mr. Frost, why did you save me? The question hung in the air. Samuel didn't answer right away. He looked at the fire, at the lamp, at everything except Pearl. Because you needed saving, he said finally. Lots of people need saving. I know. But you chose me. Samuel's jaw worked. Yes. Why? He looked at her then, really looked. Her pink eyes, her white hair, her small, breakable frame. Because when I saw you in the snow, he said slowly, I saw a second chance. You for me? For both of us. Pearl absorbed this. The magistrate is coming back. Yes. He'll take me away. Samuel's hands clenched. Not if I can help it. You can't fight the law. I can try. Pearl's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to go. I know. I want to stay here, with you. Samuel's vision blurred. He reached out, cupped her face gently. Then you'll stay. My promise? This time he didn't hesitate. Promise. That night, after Pearl had gone back to sleep, Samuel sat alone in his office. The legal papers Oswin had left sat on his desk. He stared at them. Unregistered minor. Violation of territorial law. Surrender required. He could obey. Hand Pearl over. Follow the law. Keep his land, his wealth, his reputation. Go back to the life he'd built. The life he'd built after Clara died. The life that was empty and cold and full of gold that meant nothing. Or he could fight, break the law, risk everything, for a girl who wasn't even his. Samuel stood, walked to the window, looked out at the frozen valley. The ranch stretched before him, 5,000 acres. Cattle by the hundreds, buildings and fences, and all the markers of success. He'd built an empire here. But what did it matter if he couldn't protect one child? What did any of it matter if he let fear rule him again? He thought of Clara, the night she died, the telegram he'd ignored. He'd chosen the empire then, and lost everything that mattered. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Samuel turned from the window, sat at his desk, pulled out a piece of paper, dipped his pen in ink, and began to write. To whom it may concern, I, Samuel Frost, formally claim guardianship of the child known as Pearl. He didn't know if it would work, didn't know if the court would accept it, but he had to try. He finished the letter, sealed it, set it aside. Then he opened his ledger, the record of everything he owned. Cattle, land, equipment, accounts. He began making calculations. If he had to fight this in court, it would cost money, lawyers, time, bribes maybe. If he had to run, he'd need cash, supplies. A new start somewhere the law couldn't reach. Either way, he'd lose most of what he'd built. But Pearl would live, and that was enough. Samuel closed the ledger, looked at Clara's lamp burning on the shelf. I couldn't save you, he whispered to his daughter's memory. But I can save her, and maybe that's what you'd want. The flame flickered, steady. Outside, winter stars filled the sky, cold and distant. Inside, a man made of gold finally understood what was truly valuable. The next morning, Samuel gathered his ranch hands. 12 men, good men, hard workers. They stood in the yard, uncertain. Samuel rarely called meetings. "The magistrate is coming," Samuel said. "He wants to take Pearl, put her in an orphanage." The men shifted, uncomfortable. "I'm not letting that happen." Jesse stepped forward. "What do you need, boss?" Samuel looked at each of them. "I need you to decide. If you help me, you might lose your jobs. Maybe worse. The law won't like this." Silence. Then one of the older hands, a man named Burke, spoke up. "Boss, I got a daughter about her age. If someone tried to take her," he shook his head, "I'd fight too." Another man nodded. "My wife says that girl's an angel, says you're doing God's work." One by one, the men stepped forward, all 12. "We're with you, boss," Jesse said. Samuel's throat tightened. He nodded once. "Thank you." "What's the plan?" Burke asked. Samuel looked toward the house. Pearl was watching from the window, small and pale and trusting. "We make a stand," Samuel said. "When Oswin comes, we don't let him take her." "That's rebellion, boss." "I know. Could mean jail." "I know." Burke grinned. "Hell, I never liked that magistrate anyway." A few men chuckled. Samuel almost smiled. For the first time in 7 years, he wasn't alone. The sun climbed higher, the snow began to melt, drops of water fell from the eaves like the first tears of spring. Inside, Pearl sat at the window, watching Samuel, watching the men gather around him. She pressed her hand to the glass. And for the first time since her parents died, she let herself hope. Tomorrow, the law would come. But today, she had a father, and that was enough. They came at noon on the third day, 4 riders this time. Oswin in front, his deputy, 2 armed men. Samuel stood on his porch, Jesse beside him. The other ranch hands spread across the yard. All of them armed, not to fight, but to show they wouldn't be moved. Oswin reined his horse to a stop. He looked at the men, the rifles, the line they'd formed. His face showed nothing. "Mr. Frost," he said calmly, "this is unwise. State your business." Oswin pulled a folded document from his coat. "By order of the territorial court, you are required to surrender the minor, known as Pearl, into custody of the state. Failure to comply constitutes obstruction of justice. She's not going. Then you'll be arrested." Samuel stepped forward. "Try it." The armed men behind Oswin shifted nervously. One of them whispered something. Oswin silenced him with a look. "Mr. Frost," Oswin said, his voice measured. "I understand your attachment to the child, but you're forcing me to enforce the law. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The law left her to die. The Carters made that decision, not the law. And your law says she's property, unclaimed, worthless. Under the legal definition, she's a child." Samuel's voice cracked. "She's 7 years old. She has a name. She has a right to live. She will live. In proper care, under court supervision. In an orphanage where she'll be beaten and starved because she looks different." Oswin's jaw tightened. "That's speculation. That's reality." Behind Samuel, the front door opened. Pearl stepped onto the porch. Everyone stopped. She wore the dress Eliza had brought. Her white hair was braided. Her pink eyes were clear and steady. She looked at Oswin, at the armed men, at the horses. She was terrified. But she walked forward anyway, stood beside Samuel. "Don't hurt him," she said quietly. Oswin looked at her, his face unreadable. "Child," he said, not unkindly. "This man cannot keep you. He has no legal right. He saved me. That doesn't make him your guardian." Pearl's voice grew stronger. "The town left me to die." Silence. She looked at the armed men, the deputy, then back at Oswin. "You all saw?" she said. "Yup, you all knew. The Carters put me outside in the blizzard, and no one came." The deputy looked away. Pearl pointed at Samuel. "Only him. He didn't have to. He could have ridden past like everyone else." But he stopped. Oswin's horse shifted. He steadied it. The law didn't save me." Pearl's voice trembled but held. "He did." Oswin stared at her. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Doubt. Pearl took a breath. "You want to take me away, because it's the law, because there are rules and papers and orders." She stepped forward, small, fragile, but unbreaking. "But the law didn't pull me out of the snow. The law didn't feed me or give me a bed or light a lamp when I was dying." Her voice broke. "He did. And now you want to punish him for it." Oswin opened his mouth, closed it. Pearl looked up at Samuel, then back at Oswin. "If you take me," she said softly, "you'll kill me. Maybe not today. But in that place with people who hate how I look, I'll die." The words hung in the cold air. Oswin's hands tightened on the reins. Behind him, the deputy spoke. "Sir, maybe we proceed." Oswin said sharply, but his voice had lost its certainty. Hoofbeats. Everyone turned. A wagon crested the hill, then another and another. People from town. Eliza drove the first wagon. Running Bear sat beside her. Behind them came families, shopkeepers, farmers, even the blacksmith. 20 people, maybe more. They stopped at the edge of Samuel's property, climbed down from their wagons, walked forward, formed a line between Oswin and Pearl. Eliza stood at the front. Magistrate, she said firmly, if you take that child, you do it over all of us. Oswin stared at them. This is obstruction. This is conscience, Running Bear said quietly. A woman from town stepped forward. Mrs. Burke, the ranch hand's wife. My husband works for Mr. Frost. He told me what you're planning. It's wrong. Another voice. The blacksmith. I shod your horse last week, Oswin. Didn't charge you. You really going to arrest a man for saving a child? More voices, overlapping. She's just a girl. The Carters should be the ones arrested. Let him keep her. Oswin raised a hand. The voices stopped. He looked at Samuel, at Pearl, at the line of people standing between him and the law. His face was stone. But behind his eyes, calculations were happening. If he forced this, he'd lose the town. They'd see him as a tyrant. The next election, he'd be voted out. His authority would crumble. But if he backed down, he'd look weak. Oswin sat very still on his horse, then spoke. Mr. Frost, he said quietly, do you have guardianship papers? Samuel reached into his coat, pulled out the letter he'd written. Filed this morning with the county clerk, Samuel said. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Oswin stared at him, knew it was a lie, but he also knew he'd lost. The court will review your claim, Oswin said stiffly. Until then, the child may remain in your custody, provisionally. He turned his horse, stopped, looked back at Pearl. You're fortunate, child, he said. Not everyone has someone willing to break the law for them. Pearl met his gaze. I know. Oswin nodded once, then rode away. His men followed. The townspeople watched them go, then turned to Samuel. Eliza smiled. Looks like you've got yourself a daughter, Samuel. Samuel couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Pearl looked up at him. Papa? He knelt, eye level with her. She threw her arms around his neck. He caught her, held her tight. And finally, after 7 years of stone and silence, Samuel Frost broke. He wept, not quietly, not carefully. He wept like a man who'd been holding the sky and finally let it fall. Pearl held him. It's okay, Papa. I'm here. Around them, the townspeople stood witness. Some cried, some smiled. Jesse put a hand on Samuel's shoulder, said nothing, didn't need to. Running Bear stepped forward, placed his hand on Pearl's white hair. The snow spirit chose well, he said softly. Eliza wiped her eyes. Let's give them some privacy. The townspeople began to leave, quietly, respectfully. But first, each one stopped, said something small. Welcome home, Pearl. Good job, Samuel. She's lucky to have you. One by one, they left, until only Samuel, Pearl, and Jesse remained in the yard. The sun was high. The snow was melting. Water dripped from the eaves. Samuel finally released Pearl, looked at her. You saved me, he said, his voice rough. Pearl shook her head. You saved me first. No. Samuel touched her face gently. You saved me from myself. She smiled, small and shy and beautiful. Can I really stay? Forever, Samuel said. Promise? Promise. Pearl hugged him again. Jesse cleared his throat. I'll make lunch. He left them alone. Samuel and Pearl sat on the porch steps. Side by side, the valley stretched before them, white and vast and full of possibility. Papa? Pearl said softly. Yes. What happens now? Samuel looked at the horizon, at the melting snow, at the first hints of spring. Now, he said, we live. Pearl leaned against him. They sat in silence, not the silence of loneliness, the silence of peace. Above them, the sky cleared. The sun broke through the clouds, and for the first time in 7 years, Samuel Frost felt warm. That evening, Pearl sat by the fire. Jesse had made stew. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. Her body was still weak from the fever, but color had returned to her cheeks. Samuel sat across from her, not at the far end of the table this time. Close. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence families share. When Pearl finished, she set down her spoon, looked at Samuel. Papa? He'd stopped flinching when she called him that. Now he just looked up. Yes? Can I ask you something? Anything. Pearl hesitated. The room upstairs. Claire's room. Samuel went still. I heard you open it, Pearl continued softly. When I was sick, I heard the lock. Samuel nodded slowly. I got the lamp. I know. Pearl looked at the lamp still burning on the side table. Its warm light filled the room. It's beautiful. It was hers. She loved it. Yes. Pearl folded her hands in her lap. Can I see the room? Samuel's breath caught. Why? Because she was important to you. And I want to know her. Samuel looked at Pearl, this small girl with white hair and pink eyes, this child who'd nearly died, who'd stood up to the law, who'd saved him without even knowing it. All right, he said quietly. They climbed the stairs together. Samuel carried the lamp. Its light cast soft shadows on the walls. They stopped outside Clara's door. The padlock hung open. Useless now. Samuel pushed the door. It swung inward. Pearl stepped inside, looked around. The room was small, a bed with a patchwork quilt, a shelf with wooden toys, books stacked by the window, pictures drawn in childish hand pinned to the wall. Dust covered everything like a veil. But beneath the dust, Pearl could see love. In every toy, every book, every careful detail. She was 8? Pearl asked. Yes. Pearl walked to the shelf, touched a wooden horse. Did you make this? Samuel nodded. For her 5th birthday. Pearl picked up this horse, held it carefully. It's beautiful. She set it down, moved to the bed, ran her fingers over the quilt. Did her mother make this? Yes. Pearl looked at the pictures on the wall. Stick figures, a house, a son, a family. She turned to Samuel. She was happy. Samuel's voice was thick. Yes. And you loved her. More than anything. Pearl walked back to him, looked up. I'm not her. I know. I'll never be her. I know. Pearl's eyes filled with tears. But can I love her too, even though I never met her? Samuel knelt. Eye level with her. Yes. And can I... Pearl's voice broke. Can I stay here? In her room? I won't change anything. I'll take care of her things. I promise. Samuel couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Pearl rushed on. I don't want to replace her. I want to be close to you, and I think maybe she'd want someone to love her room. Samuel pulled Pearl into his arms, held her. She would, he whispered. She would want that. Pearl cried into his shoulder. I miss having a room. I miss having a place. This is your place now. Really? Really. They held each other in the doorway of a dead girl's room, 2 broken people, trying to heal. Finally, Samuel pulled back, wiped Pearl's tears. We'll clean it together, he said. Tomorrow, make it yours. Pearl smiled through her tears. Can we keep some of her things? All of them. And the pictures? Everyone. Pearl looked around the room again. This time, she wasn't seeing a shrine. She was seeing a home. Thank you, Papa. Samuel stood, placed the lamp on the bedside table. The light filled the room, soft and golden. When you're ready, Samuel said, you can sleep here. Tonight, if you want. Pearl nodded. I want to. They spent the next hour cleaning. Jessie brought fresh linens. Eliza had left extra blankets. Together, they swept the dust, washed the windows, changed the bed. Pearl helped with everything, careful, reverent. When they finished, the room glowed, clean, warm, alive again. Samuel tucked Pearl into bed. The same bed Clara had slept in. But it didn't hurt the way he thought it would. It felt right. Papa? Pearl said sleepily. Yes? Will you tell me about her? About Clara? Samuel sat on the edge of the bed. What do you want to know? Everything. So he told her. About Clara's laugh, her love of horses, the way she'd braid flowers into her hair, her terrible singing voice, her kindness. Pearl listened, her eyes growing heavy. She sounds wonderful, Pearl whispered. She was. I wish I could have met her. Me too. Pearl's eyes closed. Do you think she's watching? Samuel looked at the lamp. Its steady flame. Yes, he said. I think she is. What do you think she thinks? About me? Samuel touched Pearl's white hair, smooth and soft. I think, he said quietly, she's glad you're here. Pearl smiled. Me too. She fell asleep. Samuel sat with her for a long time, watching her breathe. Then he stood, walked to the window, picked up the lamp, placed it on the windowsill. In the Frontier, a lamp in the window meant one thing. You are welcome here. Samuel stood back, looked at the light. It would burn through the night, visible from the valley, a beacon, not just for Pearl, for anyone lost in the cold. He left the room quietly, stood in the hallway. For 7 years, he'd kept this door locked, kept Clara frozen in time. Now the door stood open. The lamp burned. A new child slept in that bed. And Clara's memory wasn't erased. It was honored. Samuel went downstairs, found Jessie in the kitchen. "She asleep?" Jessie asked. "Yes." Jessie looked at him. "You all right, boss?" Samuel nodded. "For the first time in 7 years, yes." Jessie smiled. "Good." They stood in comfortable silence. "Boss," Jessie said finally, "what you did today. Standing up to Oswin, the whole town saw it. I didn't do anything special. You did the hardest thing there is. You chose love over fear." Samuel looked toward the stairs, toward the light glowing from Pearl's window. "She chose me first," Samuel said quietly. Jessie clapped him on the shoulder. "That's what daughters do." That night, Running Bear saw the lamp from his camp on the ridge. He smiled, said a prayer in Shoshone. The white buffalo had brought medicine. The frozen man was melting. All was as it should be. In town, Eliza looked out her window, saw the distant light from Ironwood Ranch. She wiped her eyes, smiled. "Welcome home, Pearl," she whispered. In his office, Oswin Caldwell sat alone. He'd lost today. He knew it. But as he stared at his legal papers, his cold logic began to crack. The girl had been right. The law had failed her, and he'd almost finished what the Carters had started. Oswin closed his ledger, stared at the wall. For the first time in years, he wondered if order and justice were the same thing. He didn't have an answer. At Ironwood Ranch, Samuel Frost stood on his porch. The valley stretched before him, dark, vast, but no longer empty. Behind him, the lamp burned in Pearl's window, steady, golden, alive. He'd lost Clara 7 years ago, but tonight he'd gained Pearl. And maybe, just maybe, that's what grace looked like. Not erasing the past, but lighting a lamp in the present. Samuel went inside, closed the door. The lamp burned on through the night. A promise kept, a family reborn. 6 weeks later, March arrived quietly. The snow melted into mud. Brown earth appeared in patches across the valley. The first wildflowers pushed through the frozen ground. Small purple blooms, stubborn and beautiful. Spring. Pearl stood in the garden plot behind the house. She held a small shovel Jessie had cut down to her size. Running Bear knelt beside her. He'd brought seeds, squash, beans, herbs. "Press your thumb here," he said, showing her. "Make a hole, drop the seed, cover it." Pearl copied him. Her white hair was braided down her back. Her hands were dirty. She was smiling. "How long until they grow?" she asked. 2 moons, maybe 3. That's a long time." Running Bear smiled. "Good things take time." Pearl looked at the small grave marker nearby. Simple wood, Clara's name carved carefully. "Can I plant flowers there?" Pearl asked softly. "Clara would like that." Pearl walked to the grave, knelt, pressed her thumb into the earth, dropped a seed, covered it gently. "I'm taking care of him for you," she whispered, "like I promised." The wind stirred, soft, warm. For the first time all winter, it didn't feel like accusation. Inside, Samuel stood in his office. A letter lay open on his desk. Official seal, Territorial Court. He read it for the 3rd time. "Miss Frost, following review of your emergency guardianship claim and witness testimony from multiple town residents, the court has granted provisional custody of the minor Pearl. Magistrate Caldwell has been reassigned. His replacement has recommended full adoption approval, pending final review. You may proceed with formal adoption proceedings at your earliest convenience." Clerk of the court. Samuel sat down slowly. It was real. She could stay, not provisionally, not temporarily, forever. He stood, walked to the window, saw Pearl in the garden with Running Bear. She was laughing, actually laughing. The sound carried through the open window like music. Samuel's throat tightened. He found Pearl an hour later. She was washing her hands at the pump. "Pearl." She looked up, saw his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." He knelt, pulled the letter from his pocket. "This came today." She took it. Couldn't read all the words. "What does it say?" Samuel's voice was thick. "It says, you can stay. Really stay. Forever." Pearl's eyes went wide. "Forever? I can adopt you, make it official, legal. You'd be my daughter." "Really, truly." Pearl's hands started shaking. "I'd have a papa? A real papa?" "Yes." "And you'd have a daughter?" "Yes." Pearl dropped the letter, threw her arms around his neck. They held each other, both crying, both laughing. "I have a papa," Pearl whispered. "I have a papa again." Samuel buried his face in her hair. "And I have a daughter." They stayed like that for a long time. When they finally pulled apart, Pearl's face was streaked with tears and dirt and joy. "Can we tell Miss Eliza?" she asked. Samuel smiled, actually smiled. "Let's go." They rode to town together. Pearl sat in front of Samuel on the horse. Her white braid bounced with each step. She kept looking back at him. "Are you sure?" she asked for the 5th time. "I'm sure." "Really sure?" "Really sure." She grinned. They reached Eliza's store just before closing. Pearl burst through the door. "Miss Eliza!" As Eliza looked up from her ledger, saw Pearl's face, knew immediately. "He's adopting me," Pearl said, breathless. "For real. Forever." Eliza's eyes filled. She came around the counter, knelt, hugged Pearl tight. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm so happy for you." Samuel stood in the doorway. Eliza looked at him over Pearl's shoulder. "Clara would be proud," Eliza said softly. Samuel nodded, couldn't speak. Eliza released Pearl, stood. "This calls for celebration." She went to the back, returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I've been saving this," she said, handing it to Pearl. Pearl opened it carefully. Inside was a dress, new, properly sized, light blue with white flowers embroidered on the collar. "It's beautiful," Pearl breathed. "For special occasions," Eliza said. "Like becoming someone's daughter." Pearl hugged her again. "Thank you." Eliza looked at Samuel. "You're doing good, Samuel." "I'm trying. That's all any of us can do." That evening, they sat on the porch together, Samuel, Pearl, and Jessie. Watching the sunset paint the valley gold and pink, Pearl wore her new dress. Her feet dangled off the edge of the porch, too short to reach the ground. "Papa?" she said. Samuel still wasn't used to the word. Still felt his heart skip every time she said it. "Yes." "Do you think Mama and Papa, my first ones, do you think they'd be happy I found you?" Samuel thought carefully. "Yes, I think they'd be grateful you're safe." "And Clara?" Samuel looked at the lamp burning in the window behind them, steady, soft. "I think Clara sent you to me," he said quietly. Pearl tilted her head. "Really?" "Maybe. I don't know. But it feels that way." Pearl leaned against him. "I like that." They sat in silence. The good kind. The kind that doesn't need filling. "Boss," Jessie said eventually, "I'm heading into town tomorrow. You need anything?" Samuel shook his head. "No, we're good." Jessie smiled. "Yeah, you are." Then he went inside. Samuel and Pearl stayed on the porch until the stars came out. "Papa?" "I'm happy." Samuel's chest ached, good pain. The kind that means something broken is healing. "Me too," he said. Pearl yawned. "Can we stay out here a little longer?" "As long as you want." So they stayed. The valley darkened. The stars multiplied. The lamp burned in the window. Behind them, the house was warm, alive, full. Pearl eventually fell asleep against Samuel's shoulder. He didn't move. Didn't want to. He just sat, holding his daughter, watching the night sky. 7 years ago, he'd stopped looking at stars, stopped looking at anything beautiful. He'd buried himself in work and gold and guilt. But tonight, he saw them again. And they were beautiful. Jessie came back out, saw them, smiled, brought a blanket, draped it over Pearl. "You want me to carry her up?" he whispered. Samuel shook his head. "Not yet." Jessie nodded, went back inside. Samuel sat with Pearl until the moon rose. Then he carried her upstairs, tucked her into Clara's bed, no, Pearl's bed now. She stirred. "Papa?" "I'm here." "And then promise you'll be here in the morning." "Every morning," he said, "for the rest of your life." She smiled, fell back asleep. Samuel adjusted the lamp, checked the window, the flame steady and strong. He stood in the doorway, looked at Pearl sleeping, white hair on the pillow. Peaceful, safe, home. "Thank you," Samuel whispered. To God, to Clara, to whatever force had brought this child into his life. "Thank you." He closed the door softly, went downstairs, sat by the fire with Jessie. They didn't talk. Didn't need to. Outside, the spring wind sang through the valley. Inside, a family rested. Broken pieces. Remade into something new, something whole. 1 year later, December again. Snow fell soft and steady. The valley turned white. But this winter was different. Samuel sat by the fire. Pearl curled beside him on the sofa, reading aloud from the storybook. Her voice had grown stronger. Confident. She stumbled on some words but kept going. And the girl found her way home. Pearl read. She looked up. "That's the end." Samuel smiled. "Good story. It's my favorite." Pearl closed the book. "Because it's happy. Yet not all stories are." "I know." Pearl looked at the fire. "But this one is. Like ours." Samuel pulled her close. She fit perfectly under his arm now, like she'd always been there. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. Not howling, not screaming, just breathing. Pearl yawned. "Papa?" "Do you still miss her, Clara?" Samuel didn't hesitate. "Every day." "Me too." even though I never met her. I know. Pearl looked up at him. But I think it's okay to miss her and be happy. At the same time. Samuel's throat tightened. Yes, it is. She smiled, closed her eyes. I love you, Papa. I love you too. Pearl fell asleep. Samuel sat holding her. The fire crackled. The lamp burned in the window, steady, golden. Outside, snow fell, not burying, not killing, just covering the world in quiet white. A rider could pass by now and see a house with light in the window, smoke from the chimney, a family inside. Welcome here. Samuel looked at his daughter, her white hair, her peaceful face. He'd lost Clara. That pain would never fully leave. But Pearl was here. And love, real love, wasn't about forgetting the dead. It was about honoring them by choosing the living. The lamp burned, the snow fell, and in the frozen west, a man made of gold and a girl made of snow were finally, peacefully, home.